Paul Roos here from Performance by Design, and welcome to the Culture Couch. My two guests today, one is my co-host, Emil Sutton. Good morning, Emil. How are you, mate?
Hey, Rosie. I'm really well, thank you.
Now, you've done a lot of work with our other business partner, Warren Everitt, and that's why I thought we'd bring you in today and we can have a really good chat with Warren. We'll introduce Warren now, who, as I said, is our other business partner in Performance by Design. But I want to take you back, to when you were the MD of MarketOne and when you started the work, the Performance by Design system with Emil. What were you as a leader like then? So prior to the system, both professionally and personally, how did you see yourself as a leader when you started the system?
Yeah, so I guess in terms of who I am from a really interesting perspective, I sort of went to university after being a plumber and did software development. So I'm quite an unusual person to be in that software development space, but really owned the education piece and become quite good at the world of developing systems and websites and things like that. And sure enough, very similarly to I think a lot of people end up in leadership positions, I was promoted through the ranks initially in a company in the United Kingdom and then eventually headhunted through a company here in Australia which had ambitions to grow the business across Asia and basically put into a position of leadership to start their Asia Pacific division by myself initially, but then grew the company to 200 staff over the next 8 years. And I think my big learning is that a lot of leaders get into positions of power based on individual performance, not because they have any real skill sets around leadership themselves. And that I think was probably my biggest weakness. Going through that exercise, I really sort of blamed others rather than looking at my own areas that I could improve on, or my own leadership style, or my own ability to actually get the most out of people. And I was really I had a toxic view of the world, if that was sort of a short form summary of what I felt about current workforce.
What Emil started working with you, and obviously the first 3 months is really critical, setting up the purpose, setting up your values, and more particularly your behaviours. But what we touch on a lot, obviously, is the leaders being the role models. And meeting you sort of 3 or 4 years ago, clearly that was something that you failed to grasp by your own admission. Take us through the first 3 months. What were the biggest challenges for you? But also, looking through the eyes of your employees, what were the biggest challenges for them also in that period?
Yeah, so I think, it was really just a moment of, should I just give up? Not give up, but go back to just working on my own as an individual consultant. To look at how the company grew. We, sort of first 2 years, we sort of triple-digit revenue growth, and that also aligned to triple-digit profitability. And after the sort of 2 to 3 years of purple patch and a small number of staff, we really we continued to grow in terms of revenue, but our profitability just stank. And I had this moment of just, well, it's so difficult, and I'm spending my time putting out fires and dealing with emotions and people and personalities. How it's just not worth it. And I sort of said to myself, it's just probably easier if I go back and work to myself. And I did reach out to Emil and said, look, this is one of the challenges I'm facing. I knew he had some interaction with Jared Murphy and his sort of work in this space, sort of taking people through this evolution of bringing performance and culture to the forefront of the organization. And I thought, well, look, there's really nothing to lose here. I'm either going to get rid of 3/4 of my staff and go back to a smaller company, or I go through this exercise anyway and learn that it doesn't work, and ultimately the same result's going to come from it. So let's go through the exercise. Now, the first thing I sort of really learned from the exercise was the fact that there's just different personalities out there. I looked at the world as, there's two types of people who live to work and people who work to live. That was my two, 0 and 1 types of people. And then I realized that actually people work in very different ways, and my behavior and my actions and in terms of managing people actually meant that people suffered from my management style. Like if something was going wrong, I'd kick the person out of the seat because I knew how to do the work, and I would do the work myself. And ultimately that really just undermined the person. Now, what the person really needed, because their personality profile was this way, was just simply encouragement. So I guess the first part is as individuals not having an understanding of profiles, we really understood each other from a different perspective. And we probably ask this question later, but it actually translated into my personal life, that understanding of different personalities as well, specifically my wife. I'm a very outcome-driven person. I need to get something done so I can move on to the next thing. With my wife specifically, she's a very relationship-driven person. So, a lot of times I focus on how we can get the most out of our children from getting the tasks that they need done, rather than sort of sitting down and having quality time from a relationship perspective. So that the translation of understanding people was the first part of the evolution. The second part is just the empowerment. So how do we use our current situation, our management style, to empower people to do the work themselves and feel empowered to lead, and take the bull by the horn, so to speak, and actually get the solution themselves without actually telling them what the outcome is, or to guiding them through the solution, which used to be my old style. I was just say, well, I know the answer here, I might as well just tell you. But no one learns anything that way because everyone thinks differently. So allowing or empowering people to answer questions themselves, to find the solution themselves, actually really what did do is just tremendously gave me more time to actually focus on the more important things for the company. And that was driving the business forward, finding the next deal, finding the next opportunity. And that was the big thing. So learning personalities, understanding how to communicate, and empowering people gave me more time to focus on the more high-performing tasks, which actually then turned the whole profitability issue around. I think the other thing is that, once we went through this exercise of sort of having a culture code or a framework to which we held ourselves accountable to, most importantly behaviours, that you sort of have people that are in the organisation that aren't necessarily the right people in the organisation, the people who are potentially the bad eggs, the ones that people are having a real challenge with. Now, there's sort of a few different things that those people could have done through the exercise or through the implementation of performance and culture framework. The first thing is change their behaviour to be better people, and that was obviously what I did, and that's how I became a better leader. The second thing was to not do anything. So if they didn't do anything, then obviously the person's been given feedback, or they've been guided through the fact that their behaviours aren't the appropriate ones. So now we have the data to support a sort of a management exercise to manage them out of the company. But the third one is the fact that I had 4 really poor performers. They were actually really good individually at doing their job and getting the outcomes that we need, but their behaviour and their interaction with the team was just causing really toxic relationships within the company. And so ultimately we had really bad 4 performers at the previous company, and all of those individuals left. Now, the funny thing about that is when those individuals left, we didn't have to replace them, because what happened was they were undermining everybody below them, and those individuals that were getting undermined actually stepped into the role that those individuals were playing and actually did a better job of it. So the outcome really was actually less overheads or operating expenditure, and actually increased performance, because the staff felt more supported, and we didn't have these toxic relationships within the organisation, which was a really powerful outcome for the business.
Yeah, that's amazing. So can we just extend on that a little bit? So these people you talk about, these managers of people, they left the organisation, and then the next layer stepped up. Am I correct in saying you didn't replace them, so you are able to take the expenditure of them as managers straight off the bottom line? Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, look, ultimately, not every situation will translate to that, but a lot of cases when individuals are behaving badly, undermining individuals below, the output of the individuals below them or around them is significantly diminished. So, they're not caring when they're coming into work. You're almost getting some apathetic people within the organisation coming in, because they're like, well, if the business owner isn't going to deal with this person and their behaviours, then why should we come in and care each day? And so by removing these individuals and committing to the fact that this is something we're going to go through hell or high water. And look, like I said earlier on, my outcome from this was either this is going to work or I'm going to reduce the company back to a smaller number of people. So I was definitely committed. But that learning experience that, when someone's operating at, say, 50% because they're apathetic and they're realizing you as a leader is not, taking ownership of these people who are really behaving badly within the organization, by removing them, shows huge commitment to the company, to the individuals around them. And then ultimately, I've always been a big believer that culture is also defined by your ability to identify people in the organization and promote them through their behaviours and show them the way, maybe with some guidance and training on how technically to do the task. And that created just really great, the next layer of leaders just really stood up, and I think those individuals now will become tremendous leaders for not only their current organisation but future organisations as they go forward.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great story. So I want to dig a little bit deeper here as well in relation to from your journey through the process. We had a great trip together, actually taking the work over to the head office in Boston. Some really great programming there, some deep learnings and some really solid real talk through that process. But it was a defining trip, that one. So can you share a little bit about your, some people call it the aha moment, because through this evolution, you ended up leaving MarketOne and forming a relationship with us at Performance by Design with Jared Murphy, but then also going on to some other work, which we'll talk about in a bit. But tell us a little bit about your aha moment, if you will, going through the experience with MarketOne and then ultimately moving on from there.
Yeah, I think, ultimately, as I said earlier, I sort of went through this exercise saying, okay, well, I need to either this needs to work or I'll go back to a smaller organization. But what I realized that actually the power of the program is the individual leader being the person who owns it. And this would never work unless it was top down. So we had such a successful outcome within Asia Pac. You're talking now 200 staff, 4 offices, Melbourne, Singapore, Bangalore, and Tokyo. And each individual office, has cultural differences and challenges. But with the introduction and evolution of the program, we really transformed all of those companies to be, even bring cultures together and create a better outcome. And that led to great success. But I sort of said, okay, well, I can see that in Europe and I can see in the US that they are really struggling with the leadership there. In fact, a lot of the staff that I had great relationships with underneath the C-suite were very much crying out for the ability to have sessions where they could provide feedback to the company about things that they could improve on. And so I went back to Boston at the time and sort of sat down with the leaders. And I remember a very heated dinner conversation where I sat with them and said, look, this is the modern way. As a leader, you have to be able to sit in a room, talk about the things that we can improve on, obtain feedback. You're not going to like all of it. Within these types of exercises, you don't always love to hear, things that you can improve on. But, it's like bringing up children. If I tell the kids to do something but do it myself, then what is that really teaching them? So by bringing that sort of the approach to them and saying, let's listen top down, if we're willing to sit in a room, willing to listen to the team in North America, willing to listen to the team in Europe, obtain the feedback, and then change some of the things that we can see that are probably easy to implement, easy to change, then we're showing that change is possible. And ultimately then everyone else below who also may be doing things that could be improved on have to accept, well, if me as the leader can do these things, can make these changes, do these adjustments, well, surely it's acceptable that I have to do it as well. Otherwise, ultimately we have that bad egg scenario where I either, opt in and go through the evolution with the company, or I opt out and get rid of the person anyway. Now, that dinner table, as I said, it was a very heated discussion and very vulnerable moment, I think, for all of us. But, I sat down with the leaders and they said, there's no way I'm going to sit in the room and have people below me tell me how I should do things and how I should run my life and how I should improve. And that's when I realized that my new personal values that I've obtained through this exercise were not aligned to these individuals. And if these guys weren't willing to go through that, then this is not something that I was going to continue to put energy in myself as an individual. And then I moved away from that organization. And I think that's that for me is the biggest thing about sort of this type of program work. You have to have buy-in at the top, otherwise it's not going to work. And only really sort of those individual leaders who understand that this is important will really drive success throughout the organisation, because it has to be, monkey see, monkey do, so to speak.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, was that, I mean, we talk about role models, leaders. Like if you're not a role model as a leader, and hats off to you, we've seen enormous change in the way you've led, both from a professional and a personal point of view. And I'll touch on the personal one to finish off. But before that, bring you forward now to your MD partner role at MediPharm Lab. So being through tell us a bit about that business anyway, but being through the program once, you changing so significantly as a leader, how beneficial has that been for you to start a new company from day one and using the system, walking in the door, this is what we're going to do, using that experience? How beneficial has that been to start it from day one at MediPharm Lab?
Yeah, look, a huge. And so, look, I guess, I've sort of brought in sort of a meal and performance by design team at a time when things were toxic. And I think, if I look at the performance by design framework, a lot of times, we're brought in to fight fires and to fix fundamental issues. And it's quite I can imagine, like even for me, it was quite an overwhelming experience. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about my relationships. I learned a lot of, I changed in many different ways, not just from a personality perspective, but even just how I treated myself as an individual. But having the ability to do it at the start of a new organisation. So today I am the CEO of a medicinal cannabis company here in Australia, one of the sort of the fastest growing companies in Australia. We're going to be a complete leader in this space, a Canadian headquartered company, so very similar to the one before. But I realised that, there was no point in me going through the even much as I understood performance and culture and the importance of it. It would have been stupid of me to go through this exercise, understanding the value of it, and then wait till something goes wrong and then implement performance and culture. I decided that this was something that you need to do from the outset. And look, when you're building a new business, specifically one in the medicinal cannabis space, we use our culture sort of key tagline, or our why statement is trailblazing, because we're doing something that's not been done before. Now, when you're doing something that's not been done before, it really represents significant challenges, because you're sort of going down this path and you get into very sort of tough conversations with your team about what should we do in this scenario. And without a sort of common behavioural communication framework, those conversations between the teams can be significantly tough. We have to really thrash it out. And it's not that we're in a room, yelling and screaming and profanities at each other. It means that we can have, and in performance by design world, we call it real talk, but we can have conversations about things that are really important, really business critical. We have to make good decisions at this point. Otherwise, we could end up in a part of this trail. We could end up on a trail that ends up that the business doesn't survive. But we do them, and they're just done with. They're done definitely with a lot of there's a lot of energy in the conversations, but they come from significant care, and we're always done using our particular wordings. We do them, talking about our behaviours, but we do them, we come out of them, and actually everyone at the end of it, a lot of times at the end of these types of conversations, everyone goes, good real talk, because you don't feel threatened, you don't feel challenged, you feel like that you've got through this together. We make decisions collectively as a group. And so I think this has sort of set us up that, performance or culture won't be the thing that undermines us in this evolution of this business. It'll be some outlier that we can't control. And that is sort of, we're taking the chance, I guess, out of culture by having this in place. And that is the most important thing. Like, you don't want culture to be your Achilles heel. And I just think if we can remove that by having a simple template and framework in place, then now we're just we're going down this trail and hoping for the best, that the decisions we make are right. And, you know, sometimes we mightn't make the right ones, but we know that we've done them together, and no one's going to be held accountable for doing something that they shouldn't have because they weren't aligned to the cultural framework.
Yeah, that's great. Hey, Ruzi, can I ask a quick question here? Something's come up for me in this. I just want to make note that great real talk. I think that's amazing. And I'm getting a bit of feedback from the teams that I'm working with that they're using that type of mantra as well. Like they leave the meeting and they great real talk. And it, as you said, it's as much in the moment, there's conflict, but we're working through it. We walk out the back end of it feeling better, irrespective of how challenging it was. That's a really good insight, and that great real talk statement. I love that. But on top of that, I'd like you to share a little bit about what you've been doing with MediPharm in the way of also looking out for the team from a health and well-being perspective, and what systems and structures you've put in place. Because as your designer through this process, it's been wonderful to watch how getting the buy-in from the group has actually created not only great systems around having real talk around business and what are we going to do, and knowing that we can't really follow any other path. We're going down the ski hill through fresh snow. But talk a bit more, if you can, about what the team has chosen in the ways of health and well-being systems and structures as a result of the process.
Yeah, so I think, you know, in an organisation that doesn't have a proper culture and performance framework, you know, the first obviously step is to go through that exercise, and then you feel really connected and committed and aligned as a team. But you look at, I mean, I come from that corporate world where, you know, companies will bring in a fruit box, or they'll have, you know, beers on a Friday, or all these other things. And look, they're potentially great things to feel for to the individual feel like the company cares about me. I know Facebook and Google and all these other places do food, but I think that, you know, and this is where I've sort of taken the performance by design sort of framework and translated into the rest of my life. If I focus on having a particular structure to performance and culture and put that in place, then that helps that part of the business be successful. But also it's important for me to think about the other things that lead to the healthy body and healthy mind. And that includes nutrition, that includes exercise, and that includes mental health and wellness. So one of the triggers, obviously, working through this exercise with Performance by Design is obviously I've introduced to meditation. I was just completely adverse to the idea of meditation being anything helpful. Like I said, the whole idea of sitting down and doing 10 minutes of you know, humming and listening to music, you know, I just felt like, you know, lack of a better term, that the trippers of the world did that type of thing. You know what I mean? You know, the tree huggers, so to speak. But I you know, said, well, what again? Like, it's like the performance and culture thing. If I look at it and say, well, that's not going to work, and not go through the exercise, how do I really know? And so I looked at this and I said, well, if people are stressed, specifically if it was a startup of a new business, specifically in the agency lifestyle, even with MarketOne, that, you know, if we commit to having the team have the opportunity to do meditation, to in this particular organization here, we have a 10,000 step per day activity, as well as giving everyone access to the meditation app and things like that. All of those things contribute to a really healthy individual, and ultimately, you know, more engaged if they feel like the company's really committed to their health, their mental well-being, their physical health, and nutritional health. And that just means that the person's significantly more committed and putting in for the company when they need to. And so all of those additional things, you know, they're not necessarily mandatory. The performance and culture thing, I really require us to follow that framework, but there's additional things that I give to the individuals to have access to. And then the fact that I do meditation now every day, I exercise every day, and the 10,000 step thing was a trigger for some of the individuals who, you know, definitely would benefit from a routine that would help them be more healthy, have just, you know, the energy I come in every morning, you get seen as almost like a little bit of a personal god to some extent, which is really powerful as a leader. But more importantly, again, that comes back to giving me more time back. So when you're mentally healthy, when you're physically healthy, the engagement of that particular staff group on a daily basis. The world sort of talks about 2 hours of productive time per day. I would say that we get about 6, and the team are just, with 30 staff here in Australia versus 200 in Canada. While we only are just at the startup here, I know that the team here is significantly more productive because they have these contributions to the company for them to be mentally, physically, nutritionally healthy, as well as having the culture and performance framework on top of that. So I've just expanded it, and those types of things are really powerful to introduce to the team once you have that sort of proper framework in place.
Yeah, one of the great sayings I've heard is your own health will determine the health of your business. I think it's a really, really pertinent point. It's sort of hard. If you can't look after yourself, it's pretty hard to think you can look after your staff. So well done on not only your professional stuff, but your personal stuff. I just want to finish up on one thing you've touched on a number of times, and that's the care factor. Because having been involved in football, I think with football, the media dramatise when a player gets disciplined or this player misses a game for the leadership group have done this, etc., etc. But you mentioned care a number of times. I want you to take me through that, because when we do our programs, a lot of people think about, I can't have these hard conversations, but we don't see them as hard conversations. And listening to you, you don't see them as hard conversations either. But also tell us about the follow-up. So it's not just giving the feedback and letting it sit there. It's how do we provide a solution to a particular problem? And that's the care you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Ultimately we're doing it. We give feedback, in a direct manner, but from an energy of care, because I think in a lot of organizations, the first thing that people do when someone's not performing well is they start talking about, how do we start managing this person out? Now, if you don't know the areas that you're not going well at, whether it's tactical or task orientated and doing the work, or whether it's behavioral based, then how do you improve on that? But giving that person the opportunity to improve, but the guidance and the tactics on how to improve on that really helps the person feel the commitment from the organization. And so I'd say, a lot of times now, even through our hiring process, we go through the understanding of what that person's personal values are, what types of things do they care about in life in general. And so with even the hiring process using the performance by design program, I've never had a better team. And that's because we introduce culture and performance even before the person's come in through the door. But once they're in there, if there's any challenges they're facing, we are very supportive, and we are very committed to ensuring that we can guide them through the process to improve. And that means that we're, the biggest challenge with organizations of having to go through the turnover of people leaving because they don't like the organization because there isn't the right performance or it's the right cultural framework. That's one big thing. But letting people go when you haven't really guided them through the process to improve is another thing. So you're losing 6 months each time in a role, and that hurts the organisation significantly. So we've been in this company now for 2 years, and we've only had one particular person leave, and that was by our design because we guided them through the process, and their behaviour just didn't change. But for us to go through 18 months of this company and not have one leaver is just that's sort of unheard of, within any startup organisation. So I think that's the big thing, and I think that translation into ensuring continuity of staff and keeping the right people in the right seat on the bus is a very important outcome from having this in place as well.
Mate, thanks a lot for sharing. One of the other great mate of mine, Rossi Lyon, talks about a lot of people can talk the talk but can't walk the walk. And I think you're living proof of someone that has changed a lot in relation to your leadership style. And on that, Emil, I'm going to leave the last word to you, because not only was one of our partners, but he's your brother-in-law as well. So you've seen his evolution since, I guess, primary school.
Yeah.
Tell us about how that has changed, because I think it's great for the listeners to hear a real-life story about a leader that's looked himself in the eye, had a great self-awareness and said, yes, this is not my staff's problem, this is my problem. I need to change. Just quickly, how have you seen Woz change over the last sort of 10 to 20 years?
Yeah, good one. It was interesting because we became really good mates playing footy down in Wonthaggi around age 17, 18 when Was moved into our club, and we were sort of became, there wasn't M show with the young guys of the team and so forth. But then we had a good period of life and growing up as young men. Then around our mid-early 20s, we started to travel and we went in different directions. And I had spent a lot of time in Canada. He had a lot of time in Canada as well, but at different times. So for a lot of our sort of 25 onwards to 35, we weren't together. And that's when his evolution into MarketOne and the stresses of life around business, raising children, and also having businesses around the world, and all the travel that was associated with it while I was based primarily in Toronto. But after coming back and talking about this culture work that I'd been mentored through the process in my own company with Jared, took an interest to it based on the stuff he's already talked about and making that decision. Do I want to continue this way? Because something has to change. I'm either going to pull back and make my team small and run high profit, or I'm going to continue on this journey, but I need to make that decision. And I said to him, I think that the process that I've learned through Jared's mentorship will give you that. And that's the reason why we started in early 2016. And I remember having a conversation with my wife at the time saying, if we can run this process with Was and get great outcomes, I said something along the lines of, I will take the next level in believing that this stuff works, because technically Was is extraordinary. And as his own admission, the relationship building and the empowering piece wasn't his strength. So the first 3 months of the integration was awesome. Ran the meetings, we bungled our way through it a little bit, as we often do, because things are a bit messy when we start to make change, and there's a lot of resistance, both personally and from the team. But in the long story short, the whole journey, it's been awesome to watch, because from a personal perspective, it's helped our friendship, but I think more importantly, it's actually really helped his relationship with my sister and his kids. And that's, I think, what I'm most connected to, and almost there's a sense of pride almost that comes out of this journey. And he raised some really great points. He spoke really well there, Was around eliciting the feedback from the team and then making the required changes to do the evolving first. And that's what great leaders do. They take the feedback and they change first. And as a result of that, implementing the systems and processes that we recommended through the Real Talk data, it's great because you consistently grow, because you're consistently getting feedback required to make the changes. Because ultimately, your ability to lead, or your assessment of yourself as a leadership, is on the people that you lead, not yourself. Right, so getting that feedback, getting that Real Talk, and then making changes was awesome. And so, to see Was exit that, and it's very clear. His values, once he went through the process, weren't aligned with the senior leaders of the company. And what I think sounded like probably a pretty emotional and difficult decision to make almost became easy, because he realised his values weren't aligned. And now to see him use the system inside of MediPharm is fantastic, and he's right. That team that he's got is absolutely brilliant, and they are trailblazing, and they are using Real Talk to very great effect, especially through an industry that is, it's new and exciting to Australia. So, yeah, it's been great to be on the journey with you, both from a mate, but also from a business perspective for sure.
I'd probably just sum it up, boys, at the end. I think what we talk about a lot is taking it from the head to the heart.
Yeah.
Having known you now for 3.5 years, I've seen an incredible transformation. So when we talk about leaders, we talk about self-awareness, being role models. And I think your ability was to go from here to here has been extraordinary. So I really thank you for joining us on the Culture Couch. Thanks, Was. Thanks, Emil.
Thanks, Rizzy. Well done, Was.
Good on you guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.